I am really thrilled to be here with the two of you, Gonzalo Entrecanales, CEO of Entrecanales Domecq in Spain. You have many wineries, Toro, Ribera del Duero, Rioja, and Rueda. And Almudena Alberca, head winemaker, very talented winemaker, in charge of all of those wines. Welcome, so happy to have you here in Montreal.
Thank you.
We are very happy as well.
Gonzalo, I'm going to start with you. In your family, sustainability has been a big part of the value for a very long time, way before it became the flavor of the month, if we can say. Can you talk a little bit about that history and why it's been so important in your family?
Yes, absolutely. I think part of the reason why we haven't spoken about it so much in the past is for that exact reason, that it's in our DNA, it's part of our family, it's part of who we are. We believe in sustainability very deeply. We started investing as a family in renewables in the 90s. And in fact, in the 90s, we started to communicate very loudly what sustainability was about, what it meant. It meant progress, but a different progress. It didn't mean stopping using energy. It meant using different sources of energy, for example. So it's something I've grown up with. We were from Spain, and Spain was a pioneer in renewable energies globally, but it's something I've grown up with from the get-go, and therefore this company, this winery, has also grown up with that. The company dates back older than before the 90s, but nonetheless, it's always been part of what we do and who we are.
So I'm sure it has evolved over the years. Can you maybe talk to us about the change within the sustainable department that has been made from the 1990s since you came into the company in 2020?
Good question. I think one needs to evolve. No matter how sure you are about your value, sustainability, and what it means and what you should be doing, you need to be critical of what you do and yourself, and new practices, new certifications come into play, new knowledge, scientific knowledge and research suddenly is at play. And we are no exception to that. In the 90s, we were thinking about the concept of sustainability. We were starting to find the alternatives to the traditional or the original way of doing things. And over time, we found that there's a lot more implications to what we do. So we've got better along the way, I guess is the answer. In 20 years, we suddenly are able to track a lot more of what we do, measure how much we emit, find alternative ways. Innovation is a big topic in all of that. How can you find solutions for things that seem impossible without damaging the planet? And that's what we've been up to. For the past 20 years as a winery, we've advanced a lot, and it's always been at the core of our values, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop here. I think for the next 20 years, we still have bigger, if not the same, if not bigger challenges than we had 20 years ago. So it's a moving target, and we're on it. We're trying to do things better and more of them.
When we talk about sustainability, people often think of vineyard, but it's way more than that. It involves the economic side of things, the social responsibility also. How do they all work together?
I guess that's the question. There's no point being very sustainable if you don't have a sustainable business model. If a company goes bankrupt, then it's no good. You lose employment, you lose taxes, you lose economic activity, and that's no good. At the same time, if you have a very good business model but you're not sustainable, then you lose the planet, you lose the faith from your consumers, you lose that long-term view. And the only way of doing that, in my opinion, is through innovation, or being very acutely aware of the fact that the world is changing, the climate is changing, and therefore you need to adapt. It's different ways of say innovation is a good buzzword, but it's adapting, I guess, is what you need to do, and being open-minded and being close to your partners, to your consumers, and receiving their feedback so that you can adapt all your points, your industrial, your climate, and at the end of the day, the wine you make, so that all of those points come together. So I think there's not one without the other. It's a fine balance, and the answer is not a simple one again.
I know when you started in 2020 and you wanted to go further in terms of sustainability, you came up with 4 pillars. What are those 4 pillars?
I'm the 3rd generation of my family who's involved in this winery, and I've been involved for 3 years. So that gives you an idea for a company that's more than 35 years old, and some of our wineries that date back much longer than that, over 100 years old, gives you an idea of how much has been done in the past. When I started my tenure as CEO of the company, and in 2020, we came up with 4 pillars, as you were mentioning, and one of those pillars, the first one, was sustainability. Sustainability in everything that it means, in emissions, in water usage, in the weight of our bottles, waste, our communities, how we communicate to the end consumer, making them more aware of the risks of alcohol, for example. So there was a lot of factors, and sustainability, we always thought, had to be one of those 4 pillars. The second pillar is being excellent, or excellence, being excellent at everything we do. But the most important one, of course, as winemakers, is making top wine. It doesn't matter how sustainable you are, how good you are at communicating what your history is. If when someone opens or takes the time to open a bottle of your wine, which usually happens in special occasions with friends or family, if they don't like the wine, then you've lost everything you've built. So being excellent at making our wines, and Almudena plays a massive role in that aspect, was always one of our core values. The third pillar is innovation. Innovation, we briefly touched upon it earlier, but it's particularly important in such a traditional industry as the wine industry. It's difficult to make changes, and we are certain that changes need to happen. And changes can come in all sorts of different aspects, from what are the newest varieties that we're going to plant, where you should plant your vineyards, how do you produce wine, what sort of machinery, what technology you can implement in the winery, how do you communicate with your end consumer, how do you digitalize a company. So there's hundreds of ways of innovating and breaking the mold, but being respectful for your history, which I think is also very important. In this industry, you have to be very cognizant of the legacy you're part of, and you can't break everything completely. And the fourth pillar is transparency, and transparency is a bit of what we're doing today, which is telling you, amongst other things, but telling you a bit more about who we are, what we do, and what our strategy is, so that in 20 years' time you can come back to us and say, hang on a second, you said something different. So you hold us accountable for what we said, and at the same time that we are honest and true about everything we do. It's very difficult to tell for most people what a different wine is and how it's made and where the grapes are sourced from, how sustainable a company is. So we need to be transparent, and we need to, for example, certify things with our sustainability. That's part of sustainability and transparency. But at the end of the day, it's about being honest and being a company that our consumers feel represented by.
When sustainability is your core value, it's really important to work with partners that have the same philosophy, otherwise it doesn't work. You export all over the world. I'm just curious to have your perspective on the SAQ. Are they a good partner when you're looking at sustainability?
Selling through the SAQ in Quebec for the past 35 years. We are, in fact, this year celebrating our 35th anniversary, and I don't think that would be possible if we didn't share the same values. I think the SAQ is an example for the world of how you can have a sustainable buying model, being cognizant of how your producers are making their wine, and I think in essence that ends up transparent to the consumer. So to answer your question, yes, they're a good partner. Yes, they're very aware of the issue, and thankfully it's something we can work together with them to improve and also share ideas and get better at fighting climate change.
Amildena, I'm curious because you actually were at the winery before Gonzalo became the CEO of the company. What does it mean for you to have someone who's so committed to sustainability? Because obviously the staff has to go to believe in it, otherwise it doesn't work. So what are the implications for you and your staff to follow the vision of Gonzalo?
I mean, I feel very lucky to have a boss that is very focused on that because I really believe in sustainability or in all terms of our lives. So I feel very lucky because of that, because it's part of my values as well in my daily basis. I think the wineries has been working very focused on that, and pretty much everyone is very conscious about it. So every year we are setting up calendars and objectives to reach, but the objectives are for everyone. So we start from the top and we start to filter down and give some responsibility to each of the people that is working on the team, or each worker has a commitment to build up the full objective. So I think this is a way to work all together. But I mean, we are doing so many things. Also, it keeps you focused and busy and thinking out of the box. So at certain points, we need to think about, how we are doing this, and we like it how we do it, but how can we do it better or more efficient? So we need to dedicate extra time of our daily basis works or to think about extra things for this. So for example, we were changing the protocols, for example, for bottling machine, we were...
But if I may interrupt, I only joined 3 years ago. Almudena has been here at the company longer than I have. And when I arrived, I saw a team that was already had ESG, sustainability, ingrained in their values without me saying anything.
It makes things easier for you.
Exactly, one more part of the team pushing in the right direction, but I'm quite proud to say that 99% of the people in the company carry the sustainability flag as if it were their own.
I want to talk about water with you because I know it's something that you don't take for granted in Spain. We surely do. People turn on the tap and they brush their teeth and it's like there's no tomorrow. And you know, I always like to say that currently on the planet, 70% of the water is used for agriculture. United Nations published a document in 2009 and they said, you know, between 2009 and 2050, we'll see an increase in population and therefore an increased need of food by 70%. So that means we'll use all the water for agriculture. So it's going to be an issue for everyone on the planet, I believe, because even if you have water, the neighbor will come after your water. It's going to be, like you were saying, liquid gold. What do you do at the winery to reduce water consumption?
I'll give you an answer as to how important it is for us, and I'll let Almudena give you a few examples of things we are doing. It's crucial. In Spain in particular, you talk about the world, Spain rainfall is becoming more scarce every year and more concentrated. So that's a double problem. Mm-hmm. In the ideal world, you'd have it scattered so that you're irrigating naturally your plants. Now, we don't have the infrastructure to keep the water that's raining all at once. So we're acutely aware of how important that is and how we need to manage it. It's, as a family, one of the things we've done historically is focus a lot on water as well as renewables. So it's another thing that we have data on. We know how important it is for cities, and not just for agriculture, but for humans. Yes. Drinking water in Spain, that is an issue. Sometimes you can't have a shower for more than, to give you, we're not talking about Kenya, we're talking about Spain, Madrid. I've lived in my life periods where you're told that you can't shower for more than X time, or you can't have a bath, or you can't use the toilet more than X number of times. So it's something we grown up with, and we're probably more aware of the issue than in other places. And as for specific measures we've done, I'll let Almudena answer.
I mean, this is something that worries us, and I think water is going to be the liquid gold of the future.
Yes.
So we started to think about this a few years ago. So from the vineyard area, we replanted 50 hectares in a vineyard, so changing root stock. It was 50 hectares that they were not efficient, let's say, because it was a mixture of root stocks. So we replanted with drought root stocks. We decreased the density per hectare, so we have less plants, so we can be more efficient with the square meter. Without compromising too much the total production of the hectare. We also put the irrigation underneath. So we calculate that we can save 50 to 30% water if we need to irrigate. We are going to change very soon, from now till the next year, we are going to change all the irrigation systems, so with more digitalization, so we can be more efficient. Between 60 and 70% of the work in a winery is cleaning.
Yes, of course.
So be efficient in the way of cleaning, so we introduce more vapor, like steam for cleaning the barrels. We change all the protocols for cleaning tanks, so we adapt it, and we are giving to every cellar hand like a clear protocol on how many days they need to use for clean a certain tank. And basically, we were adapting a lot the shifts, particularly for the bottling machine, because the bottling machine needs a lot of water for being sterilized before and after.
Okay.
There's also investment in water treatment machinery, so that you can clean and reuse part of that water. Not everything can be reused, but reused a bigger percentage of that. It's being, at the end of the day, is looking at the integral part of your water use, not just the vineyard, because, for example, in some some vineyards, for example, in Rioja and Cosme Palacio, we don't irrigate because we're in the north of Spain where it rains more, and we have older vines, and those are more water resistant. But other places, you need to put in place measures that are adapted to the new reality.
Yeah, sorry.
And also we are also about to finish our process of thinking about how to collect all the water and make it usable for the vineyards, or maybe for the gardens, or ideally even for cleaning again.
Yes, reusing it again. Yeah.
Inside our own wineries. So we are about to decide which is the project that is going to fit better our needs.
We talked a lot about the winery and the infrastructure and how to be sustainable. What about the vineyard? What is your philosophy when it comes to sustainability?
And so I'll let you add to that. I think there is a lot of debate as to what's the most sustainable. The short answer is there's no common answer for everyone. What's sustainable in Napa Valley is not necessarily sustainable in Bordeaux, or is not necessarily sustainable in Rueda. To give you two examples in Spain of the wineries we manage, as a given, we are trying to implement organic practices, and most of our, or more than 50% of our vineyards are already in conversion to organic across all the wineries. But there's a drastically different reality between Rioja and Rueda. In Rueda, it rains 300 millimeters on average per year. So implementing certain practices there is much harder than it is in Rioja, where you naturally have a climate that allows you to treat things. Overall, the answer for me philosophically is you need to find sustainable ways of keeping your soil and your plants healthy. Whether that is organic, whether that's regenerative, and we were discussing earlier, now there is a certification for regenerative, but that's a relatively new term, and people are finding their way about it. You need to look at your own project, look at what can you do and what's better for the planet, but also that allows you to have a sustainable business model, as we talked about earlier. So, like anything, it's balancing a lot of the moving parts.
Everything.
And you have a certification that's quite known in Spain, but maybe not as much for us. Outside of Spain, we're not as familiar with it. Winery for Climate Action. Can you maybe talk about that certification and what does it mean when you're certified by that?
So the program started not long ago, a few years ago, and is the only certification that certifies sustainability in Spain. But for the winery, because it's measuring the decrease on water, electricity, and
carbon
so on.
emission?
Yeah, carbon emission. And from this year, they introduce a social aspect.
Okay.
So now it's going to be called Sustainable Wineries for Climate Protection.
Okay.
I think it's a very exciting certification. It's getting more popular in Spain, but step by step, because it's a very strong certification. I mean, you need to have an external audit about all your consumptions, and you need to commit decreases of at least 20% every 2 years. And you need to audit again every 2 years to keep the certification.
Okay, so you need to improve constantly.
Constantly.
Yeah.
So we are a little bit worried because we started a long time ago in the winery in Ribera del Duero. We were the first in Ribera del Duero and one of the first ones in Spain where the project was developed. So we started a long time ago. So suddenly it's like every 2 years you need to rethink everything again, and it's like, oh, what are we going to do
Yes, to
next?
improve.
But this year we are going to put solar panels because this is an extra level of sustainability inside the program. And I think it's very interesting, and it's more strict than other sustainable programs in other countries in the world.
Okay, interesting.
On the solar panels, we are putting solar panels, but we already 100% of our energy comes from renewable sources. So, and that's been the case for the past, I don't know if it's between 5 and 7 years. We've had 100% renewable energy production. However, we've decided to also use solar panels. At the end of the day, if we have space, why not create our own energy while we can?
And in your mind, why do you think it's important to have certification to communicate to consumer?
I think it's key in an environment where communication and words are very easy to misinterpret or to use inappropriately, let's say. There's greenwashing, and sustainability now is a big topic. No matter how imperfect some certifications are, and don't get me wrong, we suffer it and we know there's no perfect answer, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and some things that you might not agree with. I think it's important to certify what you say, so to avoid having that greenwashing. So in every sense, from the vineyard to the winery to your renewable energy source, we have a certification for that. So at least when you sit in front of a consumer instead of in front of a client or instead of media, when I sit in front of you, you can trust that what I'm saying is true.
It's linked to the value of transparency.
I was
no?
going to say, yeah,
Totally,
coming back to transparency, and I think you're right. Climate change can be a depressing topic. I know that a lot of people feel like giving up because many people think it's too late. I don't think that. I think that if we think that, then we won't do anything. Obviously, you're very involved in sustainability. Can you maybe leave us with why we should be optimistic?
So my message is there's two things one should avoid saying that really annoy me when we speak about sustainability. One is we need to worry about the future generations. What are we going to leave for our children? Unfortunately, is what we're living in now. It's not the future generation. It's your generation, my kids' generation, and even my father's generation, who's past a third of his life. I think we're all living in the present, and it's affecting all of us. So that's the first part, is avoid thinking of the next, because that's sort of their problem, and a lot of people take the view of it's their problem, it's not going to affect me. And the second is, yes, okay, we're so far into climate change that it's no longer about it's never going to reach us. It's we've got here, let's stop it first. Let's try to stop climate change with all the tools that we have. But then also where we are, let's adapt to the new style of winemaking. Let's innovate. We talked about it earlier. Let's find new grape varieties, new styles of wine that we're going to have to make in the most famous wine growing regions, new techniques in the winery to adapt to that. I think we have the right tools, we have the imagination, we have the creativity, we have the people, the talent, the will, the long-term view as to believe that we'll find the way forward. But it's a combination of stopping what we've done and then being very positive in saying what are the solutions to the stage we're at now.
Almudena, climate change has been challenging also for winemakers. We're seeing in a lot of warm places the acidity getting lower, more alcohol. It's not so much of a problem if you're in Quebec. It's actually a welcome change. But for some areas like where you work in, it is challenging. How do you see the future in keeping on making balanced wine? I've had the occasion to try your wines many times. I've always been impressed by, I think balance is one word I always use for your wines. How do we keep that balance with all the challenge that we're seeing now?
In the way that we can create new things, and we are able and thinking out of the box. We already started planting some garnacha or longer cycle varieties. We already started with the plantation. We have this project about biodiversity in Rueda, rescuing indigenous varieties from Castilla y León. So those were almost abandoned because in the past they had longer cycle,
Yes.
they were producing less alcohol,
Yes.
higher acidity and lower yields. So this is what we want at the moment. So we already create, it's not a garden, we already create a serious project about it with 2 hectares dedicated to reds,
Okay.
2 hectares dedicated to whites. We are almost finishing to set up all our experiments. So I think there we are going to have a lot of things. And I mean, we never stop thinking about how many things or which things can we make in order to make our vineyards a little bit more stronger and our teams better adapted to that. So we are picking a little bit early, but I mean, we are more focused on the fields, tasting more the grapes. So, I mean, we are looking all the time and thinking about how can we adapt or what is our next step in order to, or the next step that is aligned with the new environment that we are living.
Yes.
We have to be really worried and we need to be really vocal about the risk it poses for those people that are not convinced. But I'm sure we'll get through it, and I'm sure our society will find, not just the winemaking industry, in all sectors, will find solutions to the new reality. It just happens to be that you also need to stop it from developing so you don't face the problem again and again and again.
Thank you. I leave this interview very uplifted. Thank you so much. Salud.
Salud.